Hello and welcome back into another episode of Jacket Sports Weekly. I'm Riley Holsinger. Here's the doctor, Caleb Yager. And Caleb, I hate spring weather. Have all kinds of events and sporting events canceled. Like how we saw this past week, only 5 Waynesburg competitions ended up happening, excluding the track and field event that happened on Saturday. But the weather just throwing a wrench into everything right now.
Well, all I can say is welcome to Western Pennsylvania. You know, if we were down south, it would be a little different. But Pennsylvania, you get snow on May 1st. You get 65-degree weather on Christmas Day. I mean, it just really depends. But anyway, back to the sports here at Waynesburg. Baseball really was one of the only teams that really got anything in. They had a 6-5 loss to Geneva, 12-2 loss to Franciscan, kind of two different games. Against Geneva, Geneva went up 3-0 early in that game. The Yellow Jackets, they came in and they took a 4-3 lead in the 4th inning, and with Brandon Durbin homered as first of the season, and Geneva took the lead back 6-4, and then it was 6-5, but then ultimately Geneva took the game 6-5. But a completely different game against Franciscan. 12-2, Franciscan scored the 3 runs in the first inning, and then it was just all Barons from there.
Yeah, and in that game, too, Franciscan was just really led from Jacob Watson, who just dominated that entire game from the mound for the Barons. Ended up pitching a complete game and only gave up 2 earned runs throughout that contest. So it was a really impressive game from him. The Yellow Jacket bats have been struggling as of late. We'll have our baseball analyst, Logan Lepiscopo, dive a little bit more into those struggles coming up soon on JSW. But it was a tough game for the Yellow Jackets in that 12-2 loss against Franciscan. The one bright spot of those 2 losses for the Yellow Jackets, though, freshman Bryce Badillion, 2 hits in both of those games right there. So certainly a little bit of a bright spot right now, despite the team maybe struggling offensively as of late. But the pitching staff definitely needs to improve as well, because aside from Corey Fisher and Joe Sablack, there's been a lot of struggles so far on that mound for the Waynesburg baseball team.
And they've been putting the pressure on the freshmen to get the starts on the bump, just like Aiden Williams. He pitched against Geneva. He gave up 9 hits, and he had 3 earned runs in 5 innings pitched. But I want to go back to what you said about Bryce Badillion. You know, when we went down to Florida, I could just tell that he was going to be a really special kid. I mean, when he was on the mound, he pitched really well in those JV games. But like you mentioned, stepping up and batting really well as of recent. So he's going to be a key part for the Yellow Jackets throughout the rest of the season.
Yeah, and another guy to kind of take our eyes on a little bit more, too, that's a newcomer for this Waynesburg team that has really, I guess, piqued my interest has been shortstop Todd Berner, transferring in from West Virginia Wesleyan. He's been impressive, really, so far defensively for the Yellow Jackets. He's just been a stud at shortstop. A couple homers so far this season. He had one this past week. So he's been a very impressive player for Waynesburg this past week and so far this season for the Yellow Jackets, which is promising to see that they have some newcomers that are really significantly helping out this baseball team right now. But as we talk about the baseball team getting some action in, the one team that didn't get action in, and arguably the most impressive team on the diamond so far this season, Waynesburg softball team, no games this past week. Couple games postponed last week, this week. They'll be playing next on Sunday.
And the thing about the softball team is this could be used. It just depends on how they use it. It could be a good thing for them to get that rest, but it also could be a negative factor in terms of not playing and getting those reps, especially when you're going into conference play. But nonetheless, Sydney Wilson, 0.18 ERA to start out the season. Very, very impressive. It's going to be dependent upon how much they're going to use her throughout the rest of the season, because you have still a lot of games left in the conference. They've been heavily relying upon her to pitch in these games, and the games that she hasn't pitched, it seems like the Yellow Jackets have been underperforming. So we'll see if the bats start to show up for the Yellow Jackets and the pitching as well throughout the rest of the season.
Yeah, and the Yellow Jackets have played a lot of games so far this season, so it's not like they haven't gotten a lot of field time so far. They've played 15 games, 11-4 record so far this season. They just have a lot more games to play coming up here. They'll start PAC play on Sunday and a doubleheader against Teal. And then moving over to some more Waynesburg University action that happened this past week. The Waynesburg track and field teams ended up going to the Bethany College Invitational. Very impressive showcase from both the Waynesburg teams, despite having to battle with cold, windy, and snowy weather. The women's team ended up getting 3rd out of 14 teams, and the men's team got 5th out of 12 teams. So an impressive performance on the track and on the field for the Yellow Jackets
It seems like the weather actually helped them, ironically. But how about Michaela Rose winning the 200-meter dash? Monica Kolenchik in the third place position at the 5,000-meter dash. And Megan Barry, Lana Jordan took third and second in the javelin. Just impressive overall from the Lady Jackets. But also in the men's side, they placed fifth at the Bethany Invitational, like Kai Herbert placed fourth in the 110 meters. Nolan Curran, Andrew Casper, Jack Hoakley all got impressive performances. And javelin was also successful as well for this men's team. And both teams really having a good, impressive showcase at the Bethany Invitational.
Yeah, and competing in weather like that can be a little bit of a double-edged sword. The Yellow Jackets really capitalized on it on Saturday. And I got to talk with Monica Kolenchik, and she ended up talking about it as it was kind of good for the team to deal with those conditions because it kind of got to build some toughness and some grit on the team, which is definitely a good thing to hear. But also for some athletes on the team as well, it could end up hurting as well. Surprised that the throwers performed really well despite having to deal with those conditions, because those are a thrower's nightmare when you talk about having to deal with conditions in the field. So impressive from the throwers to be able to dominate through all of that as well. And then moving over to some other Waynesburg news, the lacrosse team ended up losing 22-14 against Muskingum on Wednesday. 0-3 so far this season, but scoring 14 goals in a game, very impressive, at least for the Yellow Jackets, something they're not really used to as much.
Yeah, and just it's about making progress. I mean, we see in games where they've only scored in the single digits, but scoring double digits, 22-14. It's less than 10 goals. It's progress, and we'll see what the trajectory is like for the rest of the season for those Jackets.
Yeah, and they're scheduled to host Chatham on Tuesday and play at Teal on Saturday. Another team that ended up getting the chance to play this past week, and not many Waynesburg teams did get the chance to play, was the men's tennis team. And the men's tennis team picked up the only win of a Yellow Jackets program this past week. Ended up going 1-1 on the week, beat Pitt Greensburg 7-2, and then lost 5-0 against St. Vincent College. They'll play at Grove City on Wednesday, at Teal Friday, Penn State Barron on Saturday. So definitely a little bit of a busy week for the men's tennis team. And then the last of our Waynesburg sports news here for football, new offensive coordinator here and a very impressive candidate, Caleb and Gabe Lavara.
He actually was the offensive coordinator at Division I Robert Morris University for 3 seasons. And it's just impressive that this, Coach Coleman is bringing in these guys and really building a strong culture here for the Waynesburg University football team. And bright things to come. I mean, we haven't seen them play yet, but definitely a step in the right direction for this program.
And you can just absolutely feel that the culture has been shifted in that locker room from head coach Chris Smithley to Dr. Coleman coming on board here. Just a lot of excitement coming from a lot of the guys on this football team right now, and a lot of big moves as well from hiring Dr. Coleman and then also hiring Lavara, an experienced coach at a high level, something that's definitely really good to have for this Waynesburg University Yellow Jacket football team. But coming up next, right here on Jacket Sports Weekly, we'll head back over to the Diamond and have Logan Lepiscopo break down the baseball team.
Have you ever been to the Everly Library? If not, you should, because it's great. They have books of all different genres: history, biography, fiction. Try The Evolution of Life, Life of Pi, or Jurassic Park. So what if books aren't your thing? Try movies like Frozen, or TV shows like Lost. Books and DVDs aren't the only thing though. Take a trip to the second floor. Welcome to the Writing Center. These tutors will tell you everything you need to know about writing a paper, and they'll help revise your essays. Now let's head back down. Behold, the Knox Learning Center. Need to print something out 5 minutes before your next class because you procrastinated? No problem. You can also print off pictures of dogs. Because, well, you can. So grab your homework, laptop, and textbook, and study diligently. Bring your lunch too. Actually, you can't. That's illegal. Now you know the Everly Library. Stop by anytime. Seriously, it's open all week.
Welcome back to Jacket Sports Weekly on WCTV. Now here to talk about the Waynesburg University baseball team, none other than Logan Lepiscopo. Thanks for joining us today here at the desk. And Baseball has played 2 games this past week. A lot of changes due to weather, obviously, but they got in a game against Geneva and a game against Franciscan. The first one they lost 6-5 against the Golden Tornadoes, and a different game against the Barons they lost 12-2. Give us your recap of this week.
I feel like I'm being repetitive just as last week. The hitting is poor, very poor. In the Geneva game, the team hit 5 hits on 32 at-bats. That's not going to win you games. Obviously, 6-5 was a close score. But then you go down Franciscan game, 9 hits on 32 at-bats. There's improvement, a little bit of improvement there, but you lost 12-2. I'm not sure if it's hitting at this point or if it's pitching or if there just needs to be something said in the dugout, but the team is not playing well. Last in the conference, only 2 conference games in, but with the postponements and everything, Waynesburg, they got to figure something out. They're 4-10, and like I said, last in the conference with 0 wins and 2 losses.
So the bats have been undoubtedly cold so far this season for the Yellow Jackets, but the one bat that hasn't been cold, freshman Bryce Badillion, 2 hits in both games last week. Just how impressive has he been as of late for these Yellow Jackets?
He's been very impressive, and I put him down despite all of the rough spots with the rest of the team hitting. He has been that bright spot and shows potential. Maybe his teammates need to take some notes on whatever he's doing during batting practice, but he's definitely been a bright spot, like you mentioned, Riley, and I think going forward he's going to continue to be that bright spot in the team. Like you mentioned, he's young, newer to the team. We'll see what he has to bring to the table, not only this year, but maybe further down the road. But other teammates need to get things together. Batting 1 for 4 in a game, 0 for 4, 0 for 3, you're just simply not going to win with no offense.
Now, I wanted to get your thoughts, Logan, about Justin Clevenger. He pitched a little bit against Geneva, but he got the start against Franciscan, a guy that usually comes in relief, but he got the start, like I said, against the Barons. I want to get your thoughts on that. What do you think?
So I want to just say inconsistent, first of all. When you look at the game against Geneva, 3 innings pitched, 1 hit, 0 earned runs. I understand where the coach is coming from giving him the start in the next game against Franciscan, because after 3 innings pitched and just 1 hit allowed, it's looking promising to start a game and see what he does. But in the game against Franciscan, didn't even get through 3 full innings, and he had 7 hits allowed and 5 earned runs. So I don't know if, like you mentioned, Caleb, it's because he's more of a relief type of guy, but his pitching was not great in that Franciscan game.
Yeah, and there's definitely a little bit of a different mindset when you're a guy who's coming out of the bullpen versus a guy who knows he's going to be starting a game coming up for your team here. But you touched on it, inconsistency. This has been a huge problem for this Waynesburg baseball team so far this season. They've had very impressive games. That Geneva game was an impressive game despite the close loss that they had, and then they follow it up with a 10-run loss to Franciscan on Friday. So what does the team need to improve all around and put things together to hopefully kind of be a little bit more consistent moving forward here, Logan?
I think there needs to be, and I hate to be so critical of the team, but there needs to be more time put in offensively hitting the baseball. I looked at the statistics as far as the conference goes, and Waynesburg is either second to last or in that bottom 3 of almost every single batting category. And it's simply put, like I keep repeating over and over again, you can't win games and be that contender in the conference if you can't get the bats rolling. Your pitchers can only do so much. We looked at Aiden Williams last week. He did not so well in his game against Geneva. He pitched 5 innings, had 9 hits, 3 earned runs. The pitching is not going to do it all. Bats need to get rolling for Waynesburg.
Now, do you think there needs to be any adjustments in terms of pitching?
Now, that's a good question, Caleb. And, we mentioned Corey Fisher, Joe Sablak. They're the aces of the team. But I don't know any other pitchers that have really shown a bright spot like those two that have the confidence to win. Waynesburg's only 4 wins are from Sablak and Fisher pitching. So there just needs to be some guy to step up in the rest of this pitching room for Waynesburg.
Well, only 2 conference games down, a lot more to go for the rest of the season. Thank you very much, Logan. And when we come back here on Jacket Sports Weekly, Megan Berry is going to break down the softball team right here on Jacket Sports Weekly.
Back here on Jacket Sports Weekly, and the one team that wasn't back this past week for the Waynesburg University Yellow Jackets was the Waynesburg softball team. Didn't play any games this past week due to games being postponed due to weather. Breaking down our softball team right here on Jacket Sports Weekly, our softball analyst, Meg Berry. Meg, thank you so much for joining us. And it's part of that season right now where the weather can kind of throw a wrench into your season and you end up missing some games.
Yeah, 100%. They missed 2 games this weekend against Mount Aloysius, and then again, their games against Penn State Fayette that were coming up this Wednesday were also postponed due to the weather, which is just concerning for this team now that they're going to be almost 2 weeks without a game. And their next upcoming game is this Sunday, but you have to think about how these teams are going to react without having games played so long.
And for a long time, the Yellow Jackets had a big home stretch, and not playing on the road. How much do you think that's going to affect them in the next upcoming couple weeks when they've got to start playing again?
Hopefully it won't affect them that much, but it could, because you have your friends and your family right there, and just that comfort of being able to play on your home field is so nice, rather than having to travel and not be used to like a field that you're playing on or things like that. So it could put a little bit of a wrench in their system, but I don't think it'll affect them too much.
Yeah, the one area where it could potentially affect the team is that the team isn't really even to play on a field right now because some of the weather that's been coming through here. You've had a lot of rain, a lot of snow, so the team's been having some practices in the gym and everything. So how much different is it, I guess, for the team to practice inside a gymnasium where it's definitely a little bit of a different feel than being out on the baseball field and just kind of practicing there?
Being in the gym and on the field is two completely different atmospheres, and they're not even compatible with one another because you're not going to be playing a softball game inside a gymnasium. So it's much different, and it's harder for these athletes to take the skills that they've had and practice them in a gym, perfect them, and then put them on a softball field, especially when you can't even practice on a field.
Well, unfortunately, there are no games to recap, but let's give a recap of the season so far. They are 11-4. So, of all the players that you've seen play so far, who are some of the players that are sticking out to you so far?
Sydney Wilson has definitely stuck out to me so far. She is just, I wouldn't say carrying this team, but as a freshman, she is really putting her name out there right away, which is a great thing to do, and she's really helping this team. But I think in a sense that her athletes and the people behind her can't depend on her too much, because when we saw back when they had a doubleheader against, I believe, Pitt Greensburg, they won the first game when she pitched, and there was absolutely no runs that Pitt scored against Waynesburg. But then in the second game, when she came in as relief and didn't pitch the entire game, they were just her teammates were having trouble generating that offense and really staying behind the pitcher and making the defensive plays that they needed to make to stay up against Pitt. So I just really think she is a great player and she is contributing a lot to this team, but her teammates can't depend on her to help them win every single game.
Yeah, and it's no doubt that Sydney Wilson has been just very dominant so far this season. Where would you like to see improvements from everywhere else on the team to kind of elevate the play of Sydney Wilson and also elevate the status of this team?
I would say the main place that they need to elevate themselves is in their offensive play. They don't necessarily get warmed up until about the second or third inning, and that's not necessarily good, especially when you're against some of the better teams in the pack, when they just come out and they're hitting the ball immediately, and then they just start getting more runs on you. So they need to be able to generate offense immediately right at the start of the first inning so that they don't get too behind.
Well, thank you, Meg, for your softball analysis right here on Jacket Sports Weekly. And when we come back, Caleb and I will be sitting down with Jacket Sports Weekly producer Tanner Cyprowski.
We're back here on Jacket Sports Weekly, and although we did talk a little baseball already, we're going to talk some more because Tanner Cyprowski, producer for JSW, is joining us at the desk right now. He actually went down to Florida for the Russ Matt Invitational to watch Waynesburg baseball, actually announce all the games during the week. I actually got to go as well. I did some stat work, but we wanted to focus on you, Tanner. So how did you first get the opportunity, and just give us an overall, just give your overall thoughts of how it went down there?
Yeah, well, really since my freshman year, more into my sophomore year, I kind of wanted to go on this trip with the baseball team because I heard like guys like Chase Johnson and Mitch Montani, some guys that graduated from here a couple years ago, heard that they went down. It was a great time. So, I mean, I figured I would love to have the opportunity to do that. And this year, at the beginning of this semester, I believe, our sports info director, Bobby Fox, sent out an email that said, like, hey, is anybody interested in going down as a broadcaster or a stat guy? And obviously I fall more towards the announcing side, so I pretty much 5 minutes later sent an email back and said I would love to go down as a broadcaster. Bobby and I talked a little bit throughout the upcoming weeks and months leading up to the trip, and then he kind of finalized everything with the team, and then he said, all right, you're going to Florida.
Yeah, so it sounds like it was a great trip overall, just from how you speak of it. You can definitely tell about the enthusiasm that you have for that trip. But something really devastating also happened on that trip for you. You lost your Waynesburg black hoodie. Can you just elaborate a little bit more on that and how disappointed you are?
Yeah, and it was a Nike hoodie too, so it's a little more expensive than your everyday typical sweatshirt or hoodie that you wear. But whenever we left for the trip, obviously, we were leaving from Waynesburg. It was cold, so I wore pants and a sweatshirt on the bus. When we got down to Florida to eat, I took off my sweatshirt, put it in the above head compartment on the bus, went on the bus for the next day for the game, and it wasn't there. And that's, I'd say, $60 to $65 down the drain. But that was probably the worst thing that happened on the trip, so I can't really complain too much.
I'm really feeling sad for you, Tanner. I remember you were looking for it for all those days. You just couldn't find it, and it was a sad story. Anyway, let's go to the announcing side of the Russ Matt Invitational. So what was it like to announce a game every single day for the Yellow Jacket baseball team? And did it help that you got to connect with the team outside of the games in order to help you in the broadcast?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was definitely a lot of work, probably a lot more work than people expected. Definitely a lot more work than the team expected because they always saw me doing some sort of preparation for the game or the next upcoming game. But yeah, announcing 6 games in 7 days, it was a lot of work. But I mean, as you get into a routine and a rhythm with doing baseball, it's not really that difficult. And as long as you're fully prepared, which I felt like I was for every game, it didn't make the actual announcing that hard. But on your second part of that question, being with the team, I think that definitely helped a lot because the way it was, and I mean, you know that the team was split up into 3 different houses. So Caleb and I stayed with just the pitchers, so getting to talk to them a little bit and staying with guys like Corey Fisher and Joe Sablak, who pitched a good bit over the week as well. And it's really good to just sit down and hear some of their stories and maybe get some of their thoughts on the last games that you can use in the upcoming games about what went wrong, what went right. So definitely a lot of work. I was very busy the entire week, I'd say, except for the one off day on Wednesday that the team had. But a lot of work, but I think it was a very rewarding trip, and it definitely helped out a lot staying with the team itself.
Yeah, and to fill people in a little bit, you definitely already have some good chemistry with the pitchers, or at least I'd like to think so, since one of your roommates is Corey Fisher right there. And it was just a pretty cool moment that he got to be able to go down on that trip and play for the baseball team despite battling Ewing sarcoma right now. So how cool of an opportunity was it to see such a close friend of yours be able to play baseball despite everything that he's going through right now, and even close out the door and be able to close out and get the save for the last game down there in Florida?
Yeah, I think it was really cool, and because we've been friends for the last 3.5, 4 years, I guess I could say, up to this point. So to be able to go down, not only with the whole team, but with him in general, I guess, stay in the same house and get to talk to him a little bit more about how he's been dealing with the baseball side of things. I think it was really cool. And then to announce his first start of the season on that Tuesday morning versus Concordia, he had a no-hitter going into the 7th inning. Everyone will say I kind of jinxed it, but it's not a real thing. So we can talk about that later. But he pitched extremely well in that game, and it was really cool to be on the call for that one. And then the save he had later on in the week to close out the trip, it was on Twitter. A lot of people saw it, a lot of retweets, a lot of likes from the parents and people around the Waynesburg community. So I think being able to share his story while being able to show and announce what he's doing on the baseball field is a really cool experience. And again, I'm just thankful that I was able to have that opportunity.
Now, Tanner, what was the biggest challenge you faced down there?
Besides probably carrying all the equipment from the bus back and forth every game, I'd say probably just forcing myself to do all the preparation that's necessary to do a baseball game, because you're sitting there for 3.5, 4.5 hours like we did in the game versus Calvin. But luckily I found my own little system where after the first game was over, the team would play a JV game after, a 7-inning game. So I would stay there at the field and do the prep for the 2.5 hours, 3 hours that game lasted. So I was able to get into a rhythm really with doing my preparation, so it didn't kind of overtake me too much. But I mean, it was a great trip. It was really fun, a lot of nice weather. But I'd say probably the hardest part was just forcing myself to put all those other distractions aside and actually do the preparation that's required for the next game.
A little bit more of a more serious question right now. How tough is it to go away from that warm Florida weather, Tanner, and come back up here to southwestern Pennsylvania? The weather just ranges from everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, the weather was extremely nice in Florida. It rained for probably, 20, 30 minutes during that one game, but after that was over, it was all sunshine and clear skies pretty much from there. And then as soon as we got back from the trip, as soon as the bus pulled into Waynesburg, it's pouring down rain. So we're trying to unload the bus, get everything organized, standing there in 35-degree weather with rain pouring down on us. But I mean, that's just how the weather goes here in Pennsylvania, and especially at Waynesburg. It's just usually cold, windy, and rainy. So definitely a challenge for me to try to overcome coming back from Florida with a tan, going in a pool and a hot tub, to having to wear a winter jacket and pants to class every day.
So, I mean, you are a senior, you're about to graduate, but if you had the chance, would you do it all over again?
Absolutely. And I talked to Lanny's sports announcing 1 class last week about the trip as well, and I told them 2-3 times that if they get the opportunity to go on this trip again, I would definitely do it. I mean, it was a very long bus ride. You can attest to that as well. But I think the connections that you make, because I ended up being good friends, I guess, with the coaching staff after the end of the week. There's kids that I never talked to on the baseball team before that now when I walk through campus, they say hi or we talk a little bit. So I think those connections that you build and just the experience of being able to announce kind of in a professional manner where you're traveling with the team, you're staying with the team for a bunch of days in a row. I think it was really cool, and again, I'm just grateful to experience that. But yeah, I would definitely do it again, and I would definitely tell the underclassmen to at least try to get your foot in the door to have a chance to do that as well.
Now, on a baseball note right here, who were some of the players on this Waynesburg University baseball team that really impressed you from your trip down to Florida?
Yeah, I mean, we've kind of been saying it on the show the last couple weeks since we've been back, but I think Aiden Williams and Alec Engelmore, they had stretches. They're both freshmen from Shaler High School, but they both had stretches, whether it been on the mound or in the field, where they played really well, and then there was games where they didn't play all that great, and we've seen some of those inconsistencies throughout the season so far. But I think those two freshmen for this Waynesburg baseball team have a lot of potential and a lot of room to make this baseball team even better. And then I'll just throw out Corey Fisher as well. I mean, in that one start he went over 7 innings, a handful of strikeouts, only gave up a couple of hits, 1 run, and then that save on the last game of the week. And so it just shows that he can start and pitch really well and coming out of the bullpen if the team needs him. So I'd say Corey on the mound especially really impressed me, but the freshmen in Aiden Williams and Alec Engelmore definitely have a lot of potential for this team.
Now, one final question, Tanner. Can you imagine yourself doing baseball play-by-play in the future?
Baseball honestly isn't my favorite sport to do, but I'm happy every time I get the chance to announce a sport. But having a chance to go down to Florida like that in a professional manner where you're staying with the team, you're going out to team dinners with them, you're talking to the coaches. I think baseball is one of those tight-knit groups, I guess, since you play so many games in so little amount of days. So just based off all that travel and all the cool experiences and stories you can have, I think, it's a lot of travel, but if I would get offered a position, I guess, at a higher level to announce a baseball team, I definitely wouldn't turn it down, and I would say yes.
All right, thank you very much, Tanner, for joining us right here on Jacket Sports Weekly. And unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for today. But a really good show, and tune into Jacket Sports Weekly every week here on WCTV.
This has been a production of Waynesburg Community Television.